Chapter 1. Is it real? Or a dream? Raoul Mason stood on the edge of a towering cliff, his boots digging into the loose gravel beneath him. The air was thick with a strange, metallic scent, and a low hum vibrated through the ground as if the planet itself was alive. Before him stretched an alien landscape, like nothing he had ever seen. Massive crystal spires rose from the ground, shimmering in every color of the spectrum, warping the light in ways that defied physics. Beyond the spires, a dark sky pulsed with swirling nebulae and distant stars, giving the world an ethereal, dreamlike quality. Something pulled at him, a force he couldn't quite explain. His eyes were drawn to the largest of the crystal formations in the distance, a massive structure that seemed to thrum with energy. It called to him, beckoning him closer, and without hesitation, Raoul stepped forward, his heartbeat syncing with the strange rhythm of the planet. As he approached the crystal, a familiar feeling washed over him, the disorientation, the sense of déjà vu. He had been here before. He had seen this before, the towering crystal, the strange energy, the light bending impossibly around it. It was all from his dreams. Raoul stopped, his pulse quickening. This wasn't just a dream. He had learned that much over the past few weeks. Every time he interacted with the substance, these dreams had become more vivid, more real, and the things he saw in them. They always happened. Before he could process the thought, the ground beneath him began to tremble, and a loud crack split the air. Raoul's eyes snapped to a fissure forming in the ground. The enormous crystal before him began to shatter. Large pieces broke away, floating upward as if gravity had lost its hold. Then, without warning, one of the shards shot toward him like a bolt of lightning. Raoul flinched, raising his arms to shield himself, but the shard stopped just inches from his face, hovering in the air. His heart pounded in his chest as he reached out, tentatively touching the crystal. The moment his fingers brushed its surface, a blinding light exploded around him, and the world dissolved into pure energy. Raoul shot up in bed, gasping for breath. Sweat dripped down his face, his heart still racing as if he'd just run a marathon. The dim light of his quarters, aboard the Perseus, filtered in through the cracks in the bulkhead, and he took a moment to ground himself in reality. He was back on the ship. It was just a dream, or at least, it had started that way. But he knew better by now. These weren't ordinary dreams. Every time he touched the strange material they had discovered on Valaris 5, his subconscious plunged him into a vision, and every time what he saw in those dreams came true. Raoul sat up, wiping his face with his sleeve. His mind raced as he replayed the dream in his head. The crystal had shattered in the vision, and something had emerged. But what? He couldn't shake the feeling that whatever he'd seen was a warning. Something big was coming. With a sigh, he threw off his blanket and stood, his legs still shaky from the after effects of the dream. He needed to talk to Dr. Ilara Kovac. If anyone could help him make sense of these visions, it was her. Raoul made his way down the dimly lit corridors of the Perseus toward the science lab. His mind churned as he thought about the crystal, about the dreams that had plagued him since they first discovered it. The substance, epsilonite, they had called it, was unlike anything they had ever encountered. It didn't just amplify energy. It seemed to interact with time, with space, and now, with their minds. As he entered the lab, Ilara was hunched over her console, her fingers flying across the keys as data scrolled across the screen. She glanced up when she heard him enter, her expression immediately concerned when she saw the look on his face. "Another dream?" she asked, her voice quiet but steady. Raoul nodded, running a hand through his hair. "Yeah, it's getting worse. That crystal, it shattered this time. Something came out of it, but I couldn't tell what. I think it's trying to show me something." Ilara frowned, turning her attention to the screen in front of her. "I've been running tests on the crystal's properties, but nothing like this has ever been documented. If what you're experiencing is real, and I'm not saying it isn't, then we're dealing with something far more dangerous than we thought." Raoul sat down across from her, his mind racing. "It's more than just visions. Ilara, every time I dream about the crystal, something from the dream happens in real life. Last time, I saw a solar flare, and 2 days later, we got hit by one out of nowhere. Now, I saw the crystal breaking apart. I think something terrible is about to happen. Ilara studied him for a moment before responding. You think the crystal is somehow affecting reality? Predicting the future? I don't know, Raoul said, leaning forward. But we need to figure it out. Whatever this substance is, it's not just dangerous. It's beyond anything we've ever encountered. We have to be careful with it. Ilara nodded, her face tense. Agreed. But if these dreams are a warning, we're running out of time. We need to prepare for whatever's coming. And fast. Raoul's stomach twisted as he considered the implications. The crystal was powerful, maybe too powerful. And if his dreams were any indication, their entire crew, and maybe the galaxy, was standing on the edge of a disaster they could barely comprehend. Chapter 2. The Prophecy. Raoul stood at the observation deck of the Perseus, staring out into the vastness of space. The stars twinkled innocently against the black canvas of the void, but Raoul felt no comfort from the familiar sight. His mind was consumed by the dreams, the unsettling clarity of them, and the looming certainty that they weren't just figments of his imagination. His gut told him they were glimpses of a future that was quickly approaching, and worse, a future that seemed inevitable. Behind him, the door to the deck slid open with a soft hiss, and Ilara stepped in. You called for me? She asked, her voice barely breaking his concentration. Raoul turned to face her, his expression grim. I saw it again, he said quietly, at the crystal shattering. Only this time, I saw more. Ilara stepped closer, her brow furrowing. More? What do you mean? Raoul ran a hand through his hair, trying to piece together the fragmented images from his dream. It's like the crystal is alive. In a way, every time I dream about it, I can feel it reaching out. But this time, when it shattered, there was something inside, something powerful. He paused, taking a deep breath. I don't know what it was, but it felt malevolent, as if it wanted to be free. Ilara's eyes widened slightly, and she quickly composed herself. Are you sure? This could just be your mind playing tricks on you. We've seen how the epsilonite affects the nervous system. It could be... No, Raoul interrupted, shaking his head. It's not just the dreams. It's more than that. Every time I see something in my dreams, it happens. The crystal is showing me the future, and I think it's not just predicting it, it's causing it. Somehow, this substance is manipulating time, or reality itself. Ilara crossed her arms, her face a mix of skepticism and concern. Manipulating time? That's a stretch, even for us. But, she added, softening her tone, I can't ignore the patterns we've seen. Every vision you've had has come true. I've been looking at the energy readings we've gathered from the crystal, and I'll be honest with you, it doesn't make sense. The crystal seems to warp the space around it, and the energy it emits is unpredictable. Raoul leaned against the railing, his eyes narrowing in thought. What if the crystal isn't just affecting space? What if it's warping the future itself, shaping events before they happen? Ilara's mind raced as she considered his theory. If that's the case, she said cautiously, then we're dealing with something far more dangerous than we thought. The epsilonite could be influencing reality in ways we've never even considered. We've seen materials that manipulate energy, but time? Causality. That's on a whole different scale, Raoul nodded. And if it's influencing time, then maybe it's already controlling what happens next. Maybe we don't have as much control as we think. Ilara bit her lip, her expression growing more serious. If this is true, then every action we take could be part of the crystal's plan. It's possible that we're not just reacting to these visions, but we're part of a larger chain of events that the crystal is orchestrating. Raoul's mind flashed back to the dream, the moment the crystal shattered, and the overwhelming presence that emerged from within it. It wasn't just energy or light. It felt alive. It was as if the crystal was concealing something, waiting to be released. And now, Raoul feared it might be too late to stop it. Ilara, Raoul said, his voice low but urgent. We have to assume the crystal is manipulating not just space or energy, but time itself. My visions, they're not just showing me what could happen, they're showing me what will happen if we don't act. Ilara took a deep breath, clearly trying to process his words. So, if the crystal is controlling time, shaping reality, what does it want? Why would it give you these visions? Raoul shook his head. Unsure. That's what I can't figure out. Is it warning me, testing me, or is it simply playing a game with us, manipulating events for its own purpose? He paused, his expression darkening. The one thing I know is that whatever the crystal contains, whatever I saw inside it, it's dangerous. And it's getting closer to breaking free. Ilara was quiet for a moment, then spoke with measured determination. We need to run more tests on the crystal. There's a connection between your dreams and its properties that we haven't fully understood yet. If we can figure out how it's interacting with your mind, maybe we can find a way to stop whatever's coming. Raoul nodded, grateful for her clarity amidst the chaos in his mind. I'll do whatever it takes, he said, his voice steady. We can't let this thing fall into the wrong hands. The next few hours were a blur of activity as Ilara and her team prepared for the experiment. Raoul had insisted on being a part of it, showing that he was somehow connected to the crystal in a way no one else was. The dreams, the visions, they were all leading him towards something, and he needed to know what it was before it was too late. Ilara had set up a controlled environment in the lab, isolating a small shard of the epsilonite in a chamber that was heavily shielded and monitored. The plan was simple. Raoul would expose himself to the crystal under carefully measured conditions, while they monitored his brain activity and the crystal's energy output. This is dangerous. Raoul, Ilara warned him again as they stood in the lab. We don't know what prolonged exposure to the crystal could do to you. If it really is affecting time and space, there's a chance it could— I know the risks, Raoul interrupted, his expression hard. But we don't have a choice. We need to understand what's going on before the Koran get their hands on this thing. If they use the crystal's power before we do. Ilara nodded, her face set with determination. All right, let's get started. As Raoul lay down on the examination table, the lights dimmed, and the familiar hum of the equipment began to fill the room. The shard of epsilonite glowed faintly in its containment chamber, pulsating softly, as if waiting for the experiment to begin. Raoul's breathing slowed as the sedative was administered, his vision beginning to blur as he drifted into unconsciousness. He felt the familiar pull of the dream state, the weightlessness, as his mind slipped into the depths of his subconscious. The world around him faded away, replaced by the eerie, alien landscape that had haunted his dreams for weeks. The crystal spires loomed in the distance, glowing with an intense, unearthly light. But this time, something was different. He could feel a presence in the air, an almost sentient force, watching him, waiting for him. The closer he got to the largest crystal formation, the stronger the feeling became, until it was overwhelming. And then, just as before, the crystal shattered. This time, however, Raoul saw what came next. The dark figure, the cryptic warnings, and the chilling revelation that the crystal was more than just a substance. It was a conduit, a gateway to something far more terrifying than Raoul had imagined. As the dream world crumbled around him, Raoul's consciousness snapped back to reality, the weight of what he had seen pressing down on him like a vice. Raoul awoke with a gasp, his body drenched in sweat, his heart pounding in his chest. The dream, the vision, had been clearer than ever before. It wasn't just a warning. It was a choice. He sat up, ripping the monitoring wires from his arms, his mind racing as he tried to process the enormity of what he had learned. The crystal wasn't simply showing him the future. It was giving him the power to change it. We need to talk, Raoul said, his voice strained, as Ilara rushed to his side. The crystal, it's more than we thought. It's alive in a way, but it's not just controlling time. It's giving us the power to shape it. Ilara's face paled, but she remained composed. What do you mean? Raoul struggled to find the right words, his mind still reeling from the intensity of the vision. The dreams, They're not just visions of what's to come. They're opportunities. The crystal is giving us a chance to change the future. But it's a double-edged sword. Every choice we make, every action, it's all part of a larger game. And if we make the wrong move, Ilara's voice was barely a whisper. What happens? So Raoul's gaze fell to the shard of epsilonite, still glowing softly in the containment chamber. Then the future we're trying to stop will become inevitable. Chapter 3. The Experiment. Raoul paced nervously in the small confines of the ship's medbay. The sterile scent of antiseptic filled the air, but it did little to ease his tension. His dreams were becoming more frequent, more intense. The visions had started as cryptic glimpses of the future, but now they were clearer, more like instructions. The most recent dream had been the worst of all, the crystal, shattering into 1,000 pieces, releasing something dark, something that felt alive. He couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. I don't like this. Raoul, Ilara said, her voice low as she checked the monitors attached to his head. You've been exposed to the epsilonite too many times already. Whatever's happening in your dreams is affecting you on a neurological level, and we still don't know the full extent of it. Raoul lay back on the examination table, staring up at the ceiling. We don't have a choice. Ilara, the Corrin are getting closer, and if they figure out how to weaponize this stuff before we do, it's over. I need to understand what the crystal is trying to show me. The only way to get answers is to go back in. Ilara sighed, frustrated. I just don't want to lose you to this. We're venturing into unknown territory here. Raoul, you're playing with forces we barely understand. He turned his head to meet her gaze. I trust you. Ilara, if anyone can keep me grounded, it's you. Ilara gave a reluctant nod and initiated the sequence for the experiment. They were attempting something risky, inducing a controlled dream state while Raoul was in direct proximity to the epsilonite. The hope was that under these conditions, Raoul's subconscious would connect more deeply with the substance, possibly allowing them to extract more concrete information from his visions. As the sedative began to take effect, Raoul's vision blurred, and his body relaxed into the familiar weightlessness of the dream state. The world around him faded, and soon he found himself standing once again on the strange, alien landscape. The crystalline spires jutted out of the ground, glowing with an eerie light. But this time, there was something different, a feeling of foreboding that hung heavy in the air. He moved toward the largest crystal formation, just as he had in previous dreams, but now there was something waiting for him at the base of the structure. A figure, humanoid but indistinct, stood in the shadows, watching him. Raoul hesitated, his instincts screaming at him to turn back, but he couldn't. The crystal pulsed with energy, drawing him forward, pulling him closer to the figure. As he neared, the figure stepped into the light, revealing a face Raoul didn't recognize but somehow knew. The man, if he could even be called that, had eyes that glowed with the same energy as the epsilonite. His skin was translucent, almost crystalline, and his expression was unreadable. You've come far, the figure said, his voice resonating in Raoul's mind rather than his ears. But you are only beginning to understand. Raoul swallowed hard, his throat dry. What is this place? Who are you? The figure tilted his head, as if amused. This is no place. This is everything. This is what the epsilonite has shown you, what it wants you to see. You are not the first to witness its power, nor will you be the last. Raoul frowned. What are you talking about? What does the crystal want? The figure stepped closer, the air around him crackling with energy. The epsilonite is not just a substance. It is a conduit, a link between realities. It does not simply exist, it chooses. It shapes time, warps reality, and bends the future to its will. You have been chosen, Raoul Mason, to be its harbinger. Raoul took a step back, his heart racing. I don't want that. I'm trying to stop this thing from destroying everything. The figure's glowing eyes narrowed. There is no stopping it. There is only accepting it. The Corrin, the Terran Alliance. Your enemies and your allies alike, none of them matter. What is coming cannot be undone. The Epsilonite will tear the fabric of reality, and when it does, all that you know will cease to exist. Raoul clenched his fists, anger rising in his chest. Then why show me this? Why give me these visions if I can't change anything? The figure smiled, a cold, empty expression. Because you can change it. The future is not set. The crystal gives you the power to shape what is to come, to choose the path forward. But be warned, every choice you make ripples through time. Every action you take has consequences. Before Raoul could respond, the world around him began to fracture. The sky above him shattered like glass, and the ground beneath his feet crumbled. The crystal spires exploded into 1,000,000 shards, and the figure began to dissolve into light. You must decide. Raoul Mason? The figure's voice echoed as everything fell apart. What future will you choose? Raoul gasped as he awoke, his heart pounding in his chest. The dream had been more vivid than ever before. He sat up, ripping the monitoring wires from his arms, his breath coming in shallow bursts. Ilara rushed to his side, her face full of concern. Raoul, are you all right? What happened in there? Raoul looked at her, his eyes wide with realization. The crystal, it's alive. In a way, it's not just influencing the future. It's giving us the power to shape it. But it's not a weapon. It's something else. Ilara's brow furrowed. What do you mean? Raoul stood, his legs shaky as he struggled to find the words. It's a choice. Ilara, the Epsilonite isn't just controlling reality. It's letting us decide what happens next. But every decision we make has a price. Ilara's face paled. And what happens if we make the wrong choice? Raoul glanced at the sample of Epsilonite, glowing on the nearby table, the weight of his new knowledge settling over him like a storm cloud. Then we might not have a future at all. Chapter 4. The Choice. The Perseus drifted silently through space, the cold void outside its hull contrasting with the tense atmosphere aboard the ship. The crew knew that something was coming, something big, and every passing moment felt like the calm before a storm. Raoul stood on the bridge, staring at the holographic display of the Corin fleet approaching the outer rim of Valaris 5. Time was running out. Ilara stood beside him, her face illuminated by the faint glow of the control panels. Raoul, we've done everything we can to prepare, but this situation is spiraling out of control. The Corin are going to reach the crystal first if we don't act now. Raoul's mind raced. The Corin hegemony was notorious for its ruthlessness. If they managed to get their hands on the Epsilonite and unlock its full potential, the entire galaxy would be at their mercy. But that wasn't the worst part. Raoul's dreams had shown him the true danger. The crystal wasn't just a source of unlimited energy or a super weapon. It was a force that could manipulate reality itself. And it had been pushing events toward a singular, catastrophic outcome. We need to do more than just fight them off. Ilara, Raoul said, his voice steady but grave. The crystal wants to be used. It's steering us, and the Corin, toward something. We're all just pieces on its board. If we don't make the right move, this will end in complete destruction. Ilara frowned, her worry deepening. So what's the right move? We don't even know what it wants or how to stop it. Raoul stared at the holographic display, remembering the visions from his dreams. I think it's not about stopping it. It's about making a choice. The crystal is giving us a chance to control our fate. But every decision we make shapes what comes next. If we make the wrong one, everything could fall apart. Just then, the alarms blared through the ship. The Corin fleet had entered the system, their massive warships cutting through space with precision. The battle was about to begin. Captain, a crew member shouted from across the bridge. The Corin have launched an assault on Valaris 5. They're heading straight for the crystal. Raoul turned to Ilara, his expression hardening. We have to stop them from reaching it. If they unlock the full power of the Epsilonite, there won't be anything left to save. The battle erupted in a flash of light and energy as the Perseus and its small fleet engaged the Corin ships. Blasts of plasma fire streaked across the void, and the sound of the ship's shields, straining under pressure, echoed through the hull. But Raoul's mind was elsewhere, focused on the vision he had seen during the experiment. In that final dream, the Corin had triggered something catastrophic. an energy surge from the Epsilonite that tore through space-time, collapsing entire star systems. If Raoul allowed this to happen, millions of lives would be lost in the blink of an eye. Raoul knew that this wasn't just a battle to stop the Corrin, it was a battle for the future itself. He had to make a choice, and it wasn't going to be easy. "Ilara," he said suddenly, turning to her, "we have to get me to the surface. I need to get to the crystal before they do." Ilara's eyes widened. "Raoul, no, that's too dangerous. You've seen what the crystal can do. Getting any closer could put you in direct contact with it. If you touch it again, I know the risks," Raoul said, cutting her off. "But the dreams have shown me what happens if the Corrin get to it first. This isn't just about winning a battle anymore. The crystal is giving us a chance to shape the future, and I have to be the one to make that choice." Ilara's hesitation was palpable, but she could see the determination in Raoul's eyes. She knew there was no talking him out of it. "I'll prep a shuttle," she said quietly. "Just be careful. We're dealing with forces we can barely comprehend." Raoul descended through the atmosphere of Valaris 5 in a small shuttle, the battle raging above him. The landscape below was harsh and barren, dotted with jagged rock formations and glowing crystal spires. The massive structure of Epsilonite loomed ahead, pulsating with energy, just as it had in his dreams. As he landed and stepped out onto the planet's surface, Raoul could feel the pull of the crystal growing stronger. It was as if the very ground beneath him hummed with its power. He didn't have much time. The Corrin forces were close, and he needed to act quickly. Raoul sprinted toward the largest crystal formation, the one he had seen shatter in his visions. His heart pounded in his chest, and every instinct screamed at him to turn back. But he knew that the only way to stop what was coming was to face it head-on. When he reached the base of the crystal, Raoul hesitated. The air around it crackled with energy, and he could feel the presence he had encountered in his dreams. The same presence that had spoken to him, warned him of the consequences of his actions. The choice was in his hands now. Suddenly, a voice echoed in his mind, cold and familiar. "You are here? Raoul Mason. The moment of decision has arrived." Raoul spun around to see the figure from his dreams, the translucent, glowing figure with crystalline skin and eyes that burned with the same light as the Epsilonite.
"What do you want?"
Raoul demanded, his voice trembling with the weight of the moment. The figure smiled, a chilling expression. "It is not what I want. It is what you will choose. The future is yours to shape, but be warned, every path carries a cost." Raoul felt the pressure of the decision bearing down on him. He could destroy the crystal now, before the Corrin reached it, but that would mean losing the potential for unimaginable power, power that could reshape the galaxy for good. Or he could let it fall into the wrong hands and risk total annihilation. As the Corrin forces approached, Raoul made his choice. He stepped forward and placed his hand on the glowing surface of the crystal. In that instant, time seemed to freeze. Visions flooded Raoul's mind, countless futures, branching out like threads of a vast, cosmic web. He saw the galaxy torn apart by war, worlds consumed by the power of the Epsilonite. But he also saw something else, a future where humanity harnessed the crystal's energy, not as a weapon, but as a force for unity and creation. A future where the galaxy's races worked together to rebuild, to evolve beyond the endless cycle of destruction. The choice became clear. Raoul concentrated, focusing all his willpower on that single vision, the future of unity, of peace. The crystal pulsed beneath his hand, reacting to his decision, and the energy that had been building within it began to stabilize. Just as the Corrin forces arrived, Raoul withdrew his hand, his mind reeling from the experience. The crystal's glow dimmed, and the destructive potential it had threatened to unleash was no more. The Corrin commander, arriving too late to stop Raoul, stared in shock at the now dormant crystal. Raoul turned to him, his voice calm but resolute. "It's over. The future has already been decided." In the days that followed, the Terran Alliance and the Corrin hegemony agreed to a ceasefire, their leaders shaken by the events on Valaris 5. The crystal was sealed away, its true potential locked by the choice Raoul had made. As he stood on the bridge of the Perseus, looking out at the stars once again, Raoul felt a sense of peace. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, it felt like humanity had a say in what came next. And that, Raoul knew, was the most dangerous and most powerful substance in the galaxy, in dreams and in real life. This concludes the story. Thank you for listening. Please comment any thoughts and stay tuned for more.